Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. So tonight is a really important by-election as an indicator of what's happening with the different political parties in Toronto Rosedale. And is it Toronto Rosedale or Toronto St. Paul's? I can't remember now.
St. Paul's. St.
St.
Paul's.
Paul's. I
I
apologize.
believe St. Paul's.
My guest is Dan Donovan, who is the editor and publisher of Ottawa Life magazine. But he's also, in addition to very knowledgeable what's going on in Ottawa, very knowledgeable what's going on in politics and across Canada because of what he studies, what he writes on, and his background as a political staffer and as a stand-up comedian, which I always think is a fascinating combination. I also thought that given that it's sort of the end of the parliamentary season, and there's a lot of issues that have come up over the course of the last couple of months, it'd be helpful to check in with Dan to talk about, all of those issues. But let's start, if we could, Dan, with the by-election. Do you think it's important what happens tonight?
Well, first of all, Brian, because I'm not going to let you out of this, since we are talking elections here, I want to congratulate you on such a superb effort in Mississauga. And my hat's off to any citizen who puts their hat in the ring, and certainly in such a short time frame. When you decided to put your hat in for that, you had an incredible showing. So I was following you, and some of my colleagues and friends were, and I really want to congratulate you on your passion for the issues, and gosh, you made a lot of sense. So congratulations.
No, I appreciate that. Thank you very
Going
much.
Going to the by-election, tonight in Toronto, there's a number of things, that people look at as barometers of what is going on. And there's a famous saying about polls, polls are for dogs. There's an element of truth to that. By-elections, governments in the past have lost by-elections and won following elections. So that's nothing new. But I think we're in a different moment here, because if you look at the by-election tonight and you look at the energy that it's had for the Conservatives, we'll see when the polls close if that proves to be true. But that is, in fact, a danger for the entire caucus of sheep, Liberal MPs in the Toronto area, who I think are just a bunch of sheep. They are a failed caucus, in my view. They have failed not only Canada, they have failed Ontario, they have failed the city of Toronto. And my view is that they should all be thrown out. I look at the transit issues in Toronto, look at the anti-Semitism in Toronto, look at the drug problem in Toronto, look at the economy in Toronto. How can they shut? I mean, I live in Ottawa and I avoid Toronto like the plague because of the traffic. How can they shut down the Gardiner? Oh, and then you're going to have people listening to, oh, well, those are provincial issues. Those aren't federal issues. Well, you know what? Changing public money, there's one taxpayer. There's one taxpayer. The federal government has a huge amount of influence across the board in terms of money it transfers to the provinces and money it transfers to the city. Look at the immigration issue in Toronto. Why, first of all, the federal government, and again, this goes back to this parliamentary session, the Trudeau government allowed 1.2, just over 1.2 immigrants into the country in an 18-month period.
1.2 million.
Million. Now, we're all immigrants. Come on, we're all, my descendants came from Ireland during the famine. We're all immigrants. We are a country of immigrants, and we need immigrants. But we've always done it in a way that's measured. When it comes to immigration policy for any country, the rule is this: the country gets to decide who are the immigrants that are coming in. And ideally, when the world was sane before Justin Trudeau's government, we looked at what are the skill sets of these people coming in. Are they apprentices? Do they have, if they're doctors or nurses, do they have medical training? There's a big problem there because we don't accept their certifications. It causes further delays. Are they going to contribute to the economy and help build the economy and investments in the economy through working in jobs and paying taxes? But what Trudeau's done is he's brought in 1.2 million immigrants here. A lot of them do not have any of those skills. They've come in under the guise of going, in some cases, there's a massive fraud going on in the college system across the country who've charged these people. A lot of them who've come in as students, paid a lot of money to come in, and they're supposed to be going home. Now they want to stay. The government is saying they're going to allow them to stay. A lot of them are working like at Tim Hortons and these Joe jobs across the country. And you know what? I don't want to sound derogatory when I say Joe job. That any job is a good job. I respect anybody that works. But I'm just saying these are not skilled jobs. These are entry level jobs, and it's hard to live and have and make a living and have a home or an apartment when you're in those jobs. So they fooled these. They've lied to these immigrants that are coming here and given them this idea that, come to Canada and you can succeed. What they find is the immigrants are coming here. A lot of them are going to Toronto because it's, with the exception of it's a great city. It was a great city. We won't get into the Toronto Maple Leafs, anyways. But it's the kind of thing where they come to Toronto. Rent in Toronto for a 2-bedroom is about $3,500 a month. A studio apartment costs $2,200 a month. There's a massive drug and fentanyl crisis in the city. The public parks are full of tents with people living there, and the government has just allowed this to proliferate. And what about communities those parks are built for? Families, kids.
They can't go in there, don't feel comfortable going inside anymore.
And then they get on the public transit, and there are people defecating on the transit, sleeping on the transit.
So you think this is primarily, a result of over immigration to lax immigration rules, the 1.2 million people?
No, actually, to be clear, it's not what I'm saying. I believe in immigrants. We need immigrants. We're all immigrants. We have to love our society built on immigrants. But what I'm saying is, we are not bringing in, it's when you have an immigration policy, the policy should be based on what type of immigrants are going to help build our country and make it the great country it was before Mr. Trudeau. And whether it was when Clifford Sifton brought in immigrants in 1902, 1903, and they settled the West, and a lot of them came from Central Europe. That's why there's a big Ukrainian presence, a big Central European presence out in the prairies. The Irish came to the Ottawa Valley and into Quebec, and they built the canal systems here. What has happened with Trudeau is he's so superficial. We are increasing our immigration, and he just brought in people without a plan. And so then
the biggest increase in immigration this past year are people coming on student visas.
Yes.
And so it's people that are coming to get education. Some people, and there's a big article in the Globe and Mail this past weekend on that a lot of the people that are coming sort of as pseudo work visas, because they're, as you mentioned, coming on a student visa, but then trying to get a job. And then also it's a what's perceived as a quick way to permanent residence. So it's a sort of a back channel way to getting permanent resident status, come in as a student first. And then I think a lot of it is private colleges. So it's the public universities that are charging 5 times more for international students. And so it's a way of them getting money and tuition money that they wouldn't be able to get from domestic students. But it's a lot of these private colleges that may or may not actually be providing really good education, and they're just really, offering people a backdoor, easy, quick way into permanent residency.
Well, I think you're absolutely right. And that, to me, is a massive fraud on our system that needs to be shut down and investigated. But you have the very tepid minister responsible for this, who now wants to just glaze over that and give everyone the ability to stay. And
so, Dan, you have been very critical in the last couple of minutes about the current Liberal government. I thought you were a Liberal.
I like to say I was a Liberal, but I didn't leave the Liberal Party. The Liberal Party left me.
Where'd it go?
Well, it went to the cult of Justin. We have a cult running our country right now, and I'm not being light when I say that. I can't believe how many people have thrown themselves in front of the bus for this guy. To me, it's insane. Just here are some of the stats. When Trudeau got in, our deficit was $320 million. Today, it's $1.3 trillion. 1.3 trillion. And we could have managed the COVID spending that we had, no problem. So people say, oh, it's because of COVID. No, that spending has to do with other things outside of COVID. This government has spent more money since 2015. So in the last 8 years, they have spent more money than all governments from 1867 to 2015 combined. We have a $1.3 trillion deficit. This year, we will spend more in interest on the deficit, almost $55 billion in interest on the deficit than we take in HST taxes. So the consumer tax that they're collecting right now, all of it is going to pay for the interest on the debt that they've run up. Anita Nam was before a parliamentary committee this week, and she seems completely clueless about how much of a problem this is. They asked her about it, and she started talking about dental care. Apparently, we have a national dental care program that thousands of people have signed up for. Do you know why? Because other people and dentists aren't signing up for it because it's got a cap on it, about $500 a year. Right now, it's for seniors. For you to get into the program, there's this Orwellian paperwork thing dentists have to do. So they need to know what the salaries of every one of their patients are before they can give them access to a program that gives you $500. Then they say they have a national pharmacare program. We don't have a national pharmacare program. This is the big lie. What they've done is they passed a bill. They called it the National Pharmacare Program, but in fact, what it covers is coverage for type 1 diabetics, which, by the way, should have been covered years ago. Type 1 diabetics, if they don't get insulin every day, they die. It's not like type 2 diabetic. There's two completely different things, which a lot of type 2s it's diet related and other factors. Type 1 diabetics in this country are people, if they do not get their insulin shots several times a day, they will die. That, to me, should have been covered 40 years ago under the Health Act. It wasn't. So that's all they've done is they've covered this. And there was a big lobby for years to do it. So we don't have a national pharmacare plan. That's a lie. We don't have, this. Well, the other thing the national pharmacare covers is contraception. So for condoms and protection and that kind of thing, and products for women for reproduction, that's covered, and insulin. The people, I can tell you, that go to the drugstore and have to pay these insane fees for prescriptions and for prescription drugs, they're not covered. So what we have is a narrative by a government that's based on a lie. They're in denial about the mess they have the country in. And then they try to suggest that inflation is based on the war in Ukraine. These people are like insane. No, it's not. We had 9/11. We had the war in Afghanistan. We had natural disasters. All of those things happened and triggered things that didn't cause the amount of inflation we have. The amount of inflation we have today is caused entirely by the mismanagement of the federal public budget. It's caused by quantitative easing of the Trudeau government and the Bank of Canada printing $800 million in money that have caused this inflationary explosion in this country. And it's caused by just general mismanagement and the carbon tax, of course. The carbon tax, here's a clue. People are getting hit in the pocketbook at the grocery store with their rent, with their property taxes. And what's the solution of this government? Oh, let's give you another tax. Let's jam it in your ear and tax you on your gas taxes and vehicles to these insane amounts. And then you have a prime minister who's so pious he preaches that people and the health minister, Mark Collins, who went on some kind of a ditzy rant in the House of Commons about how if people drive cars in the summer to take their kids on vacation, they're helping the planet to burn. Meanwhile, this leader, this cult, Justin Trudeau, flies around on government subsidized jets all over the world, spewing fuel everywhere. These guys are there's that old saying, Brian, and I can't believe I'm saying this about the political leadership in our country, because I generally, you like to be nice about things, but there's an old adage that sometimes it's hard to communicate with people who are so stupid they don't even realize they're stupid. And we saw a whole lot of this at committee this week with the Treasury Board Minister for our country, Anita Anand, who appears completely clueless to the financial disaster they've gotten our country in. It's just, to me, it's unbelievable.
So what do you think is going to happen in the by-election, and what should happen?
Well, I think there are two things. If the Conservatives win, it will that will be an upset. But it's Toronto, so it's downtown Toronto. So they have this. It's the Tories haven't held that seat since Mulroney in the '80s, I think. I think there's a lot of people in that riding that are concerned about inflation, and they're concerned about the economy, and they're concerned about the city of Toronto. And what is that thing you get down there, Dundas Square, Seneca, Seneca Square? So what is it? Like all the important issues they're concerned about. So, if if um, if if the Tories win, I think it's great. It's going to just further reinforce the polling that is showing that Pierre Poilievre is running on average 22 to 25 points ahead in every category. If the Liberals pull it out again, Trudeau will turn around and say that that people still support them. So either way, I just don't think it's going to make a difference in terms of the coming election, where in every category, by far, Mr. Poilievre and the Conservatives are 22 to 25 points ahead in 18 to 30-year-olds, 30 to 50-year-olds, 50 to up. They're ahead in all of those categories. I don't see this turning around. And
I've actually got a different point of view. I think
Sure.
that if the Conservatives win, I think everyone within the Liberal Party will say Trudeau's got to go, and Trudeau will end up going, and we'll end up having a leadership convention, and it'll be a very different result potentially in the upcoming election, because I think all bets are off if the Liberals elect someone new that actually takes the party a different direction than the cult of Justin Trudeau that you've well described. I think that if the Liberals maintain their seat, I think that a lot of Liberals will say, "See, we can still win. We can still win urban Canada." And I don't think there'll be changes, and I think that then it'll be Trudeau versus Poilievre, and it'll probably be the result that you've just described. So I think it's actually ironic that the Conservatives would be better off if they lose, and the Liberals keep it. Anyway, we got to take a break for some messages, and we're going to be back in just 2 minutes with Dan Donovan, the editor and publisher of Ottawa Life magazine, talking about where we are politically in Canada today. Stay with us, everyone. Back in 2. Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. My guest tonight is Dan Donovan. He's the editor and publisher of Ottawa Life magazine. He is a former Liberal staffer on Parliament Hill, but back a couple decades ago. He's obviously very negative, if you've been listening to us so far tonight, on the current Trudeau government. Calls it a cult, not the Liberal Party, cult of Trudeau rather than the Liberal Party. And he's pretty negative on where we are politically right now and fiscally. Let me take you back to
Brian,
one issue, if I could.
Yeah. I was just going to comment on your analysis on that by-election.
Sure, go ahead.
Which I thought, yeah, I just wanted to comment on that because I think it's interesting. And so here's the challenge. If there's a lot of Tories actually that are silently saying they hope the Liberals win that seat because they want Trudeau to stay on as the leader to run against Poilievre. So that's one narrative you hear here in the capital. But I think the other reality is this. You were saying you mentioned the word bet. I'm not a betting person, but I would bet you on this. Even if Trudeau and the Liberals lose on Monday night or tonight, I don't think Trudeau will step down. I think Justin Trudeau is such a narcissist. He's proven to be such a narcissist with this messiah complex. And I mean, who else stays at a $6,000 a night hotel room in London, England? Yeah, listeners will remember when they criticized Bev Oda and the Harper government for she got a $17 glass of juice at an expensive hotel in Europe, and it caused her to resign. This guy stays for a week at a $6,000 a night hotel suite in England during the Queen's visit. Goes down to the bar and starts singing songs on the eve of her funeral because he thinks that's somehow appropriate. So this person is so detached from reality, and he's going to pull a Kathleen Wynne. There is no way this guy's going to leave the Liberal Party before the next election. I would bet you on that. He's going to pull a Kathleen Wynne and bring everybody down. And regardless of what happens
But
tonight or not,
if
there's
the
no one in
Liberal
the
Party,
wings.
if the Liberal Party thinks that, won't they force him out?
No, I think the disconnect here is, and I would hope I'm proven wrong, but I don't think I am. There is no Liberal Party. There is the cult of Justin. Everyone in all of the positions are, are part of the Justin Trudeau adoration team. And how else do you explain? There's only been two people, well, not two, there's probably been maybe three or four who have just not, who haven't taken the ticket to ride and jumped off this train. One of them was Jane Philpott, the former health minister, who was brilliant in her own right, who wouldn't go along with the SNC Lavalin scandal, criminal scandal that happened in his first term. And remember, Trudeau is the only prime minister in office who's been sanctioned for ethics violations 3 times while in office. So Jane Philpott quit. Jody Wilson-Raybould. To me, this is irony, right? Jody Wilson-Raybould, the first Indigenous female Attorney General and Justice Minister of Canada. A lawyer. Now, on her politics, people could disagree, but she's a brilliant woman. She would not go along with the corruption and quit. She would not agree to allow Trudeau to change the criminal code illegally so SNC Lavalin could get off. And your listeners can go on YouTube and listen to the phone call she taped of the former clerk of the Privy Council, Michael Wernick, trying to coerce her into breaking the law. That's how I saw that call. Most people saw that. She just said, "We're not doing this. You can't do this." She quit. Then you had that Chavez lady from Scarborough, and another racialized woman who told Trudeau, I can't use the language she used here, where to go, and quit. But then you have people
What about the former Minister of Finance?
Oh, come on. That guy, he only quit when he realized that he was losing ground, and he wasn't part of the club anymore. That guy didn't quit out of principle. And then he came back and he had this whiny book about woe is me. Like, no, I don't think so. And then you've got Marcel Mendicino. And here's what's awful. Here's what's really awful. Something happened in Toronto this week that I think is awful. But it tells you about the state and the anger of the Canadian public towards this government. Apparently, Mendicino was going into a subway in Toronto and some nut spit on him. Now, that person who spit on him, that's an assault, and that person should be arrested. And we cannot allow that to happen in this country, where I don't care what party you're from, or even if it's a cult like the Trudeau cabinet, and we still are a democracy here. And people don't have the right to go up and accost Liberal ministers or Liberal MPs or any Conservative, any MP, just because you don't agree with them. So, but but it also is a sign of the level of frustration with the public with this very, very dismissive government, of course, who are propped up by by Jagmeet Singh. So the atmosphere in the country right now is very, very toxic, I guess is what I'm saying.
Sure is. Let's go back to the by-election just for a second, Don, if we could. Dan, sorry. So Leslie Church is the candidate for the Liberal Party. She's got a law degree, but she's worked, other than a year at a law firm in politics the whole time. She had a reasonably good political job as chief of staff for the Minister of Finance, the Deputy Prime Minister of Canada, Chrystia Freeland. But it was a political job.
That's not helping her.
It
That's
was
not
a
going to
civil.
help her.
I know. And before that, all of her jobs were similarly political appointee jobs. So I think she's a career politician. Even though she hasn't been in politics, she's been a political activist working in communications jobs for Michael Ignatieff, and then in other jobs on Parliament Hill. The Conservative candidate, and she has only recently moved into the riding, been a resident of Ottawa for the majority of the last 10 or 15 years. The Conservative candidate is a local person, a business person who's started his own construction company and then worked on Bay Street and has reasonably good charitable functions and business functions in the Toronto community. So you've got a local involved business person and a transplanted political activist, career politician from Ottawa. Just on the face of it, I would have thought, party aside, the Conservative candidate's the better representative of the riding, is he not?
That's could be. It could be probably true. I don't know. I don't. I know of both of the candidates. Can't say that I know them well enough, personally to make a comment on that. What I would observe is this. This has been in the playbooks of governments for years, where they drop a parachute candidate into a riding. From Jim Coots is a good example of when Pierre Elliott Trudeau was the prime minister. Jim Coots is a brilliant person, very smart Ottawa guy.
I've lost you. You're going on mute. Okay, you're back. Continue, please.
So this dropping parachute candidates into safe Liberal ridings or Conservative ridings has happened for years. Brian Mulroney first ran in Nova Scotia for Elmer MacKay in Central Nova because it was a safe riding to get into the House of Commons. This is a little different in the sense that this person is being dropped in, obviously has capabilities, but is not from the area. So, at the end of the day, the only people that are going to have to look in the mirror at the end of this are the voters. If they end up voting for somebody that's not from the riding, then they should not have expectations when they start to get disappointed later with more of the same.
So I drove through the riding. I drove through the riding earlier this week, or last week, and in sort of the well-to-do area, you saw a lot of Conservative signs. But it really is a riding that has got a high income area and then a lot of other more middle income, if not lower middle income areas. And there were a ton of Liberal signs. And so it really was this dichotomy of one area was very conservative, the beautiful homes of Forest Hill, and then other areas that were predominantly Liberal. So I think that my bet is that it's going to be a Liberal victory, just based on the history and based on the demographics and based on its, urban downtown Toronto. But I think it's going to be very close, a lot closer than a lot of people thought when it was initially called.
Well, it's a safe Liberal riding. They're dropping their candidate in. One of the things, one of the playbooks of this government, of course, has been to, like no one ever before, to magnify societal differences, to talk about class structure, to redistribute wealth. They tax and try to redistribute wealth. They have this diversity, equity, inclusion agenda, but that is an agenda that's proven to be an agenda that's dividing people more than uniting people. It puts everybody in a category and says, based on this is what you are. Well, you're a racialized person. You're a Caucasian person. You're an Asian person. You're this religion. You're that religion. This whole narrative, I believe, has been very destructive towards our country, and it's playing out at the local levels. Poilievre has gone across the country and done and literally met with hundreds of thousands of people in small communities. And over the last 18 months, and what we're seeing as a result of that is in every category in the polling, he's 20 to 25 points ahead. Now, in this riding in downtown Toronto, this will play out. But I think, to your point, just the idea that the Conservatives are even in the race here and are threatening the Liberals is a signal to them that they are in big trouble. But they don't see it that way. I think if you listen to Trudeau, it's like he has a disconnect with the citizens that he's the prime minister for. If you look at Anita Anand, she has a disconnect with the fact that our country's in so much financial trouble. It's very disturbing to me, again, by the way, that we have someone who's the head of our Treasury board who doesn't see debt as an issue. So these are.
I thought the deficit will take care of itself.
Apparently that's the rule. Apparently you can get a credit card, I'm told, Brian, as we tell our kids, here's a credit card, just spend it, don't worry about ever making a payment on it. Oh, don't worry about that 30% interest rate. It's not going to mean anything. Someone will take care of that for you. And here's the other crazy thing in Ottawa. We have the governor of the Bank of Canada who got all of this wrong, printed all this extra money, launched the rocket of inflation in this country with his awful management and his policies. And his job is to keep inflation at 2% and is to ensure that he has policies that encourage employment. That's what his job is. He did the complete opposite of that. Now, here's a clue. Then these guys give themselves a $72 million in bonuses over 3 years. It's like the CBC president, Catherine Tate. She lays off 800 people, and then she gives herself and her management team and the board, the board, which she is on, they give themselves $16 million in bonuses last year. These people are shameless. And the CMHC, they gave themselves a year and a half ago $890,000 in bonuses to 10 people on their executive team. This is all public money, because this is a problem in Ottawa that there's no red lines around anything anymore. They've just thrown fiscal rules out the window, and they're on this spending spree. And then they announce things to pretend like things aren't wrong. Like, that's why they say we have a national pharmacare plan, which we don't. And then they'll turn around and say we have a national dental plan, which we don't. But it's all driven by their social media posts, which, by the way, is why they've gotten they brought in the Online Journalism Act, and you can't get Facebook on anything on any news sites in this country anymore. So I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but I see at play here a very ideologically driven government. And if the people in Toronto want change, then they have to go out and vote for the change, or they're not going to get the change. And they're going to spend hours driving on blocked highways and having drug addicts on their public transit, and their parks full of people with needles in their arms. And then we pay the police $120,000 in average in salaries on a year, and you never see them. You see them outside construction sites getting overtime. You wonder, we put so much money into all this thing, but we're not helping the people in need, the people that are suffering, the people on the streets. They need to be taken off the streets and gotten into treatment, and they need help. But, we can't do that because they have rights. This is insane.
It is insane. And we're doing the same thing over and over again. And Einstein had a comment about doing the same thing over and over again and thinking you were going to get a different result. He did call it insanity. We're going to take a break for some messages. We'll be back with Dan Donovan talking about where we are. I'm going to ask him about this foreign interference issue. I'm going to ask him about national defense. I'm going to ask him about housing. Stay with us, everyone. Back in 2 minutes.
Okay.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. My guest tonight is Dan Donovan. We're sort of doing a roundup of the Canadian political landscape tonight because of the by-election, which I think is happening in St. Paul's, Toronto, St. Paul's tonight. And I think it's going to be, if not a bellwether, it's going to be a really interesting indication about where the political prospects of the Liberal Party and the Conservative Party are. And I think it's going to be very sobering for the Liberal Party, because I think it's going to be a lot closer than a lot of people thought. I don't think the Conservatives are going to win, but we'll see. I think it's going to be an interesting result. But Dan, let's talk about a couple of issues. One of the issues that really has come up big time in the last week or so, well, frankly, the last couple of months, but certainly in the last weeks, with people reading the foreign interference report, is foreign interference in elections. Where do you think that stands right now, both in reality and in the public's opinion of it all?
Um, Again, I go back to the challenges we have in government today with the management of issues, and it particularly applies to this foreign interference issue. Because the first thing is, did foreign interference occur? Was it occurring? Is it occurring? Yes. Yeah, that's a given. Nobody's denying that. None of the parties are denying that. But the broader issue is, what are we doing to adjudicate that, and what are the processes we have to deal with that? If you read the report that David Johnston came out with, David Johnston, again, a former great governor general, but who tainted himself, and I just can't get over why he did this last year. You may recall the Trudeau government had named him to look into this matter, and he was completely trashed when that happened as a friend of the Trudeau family, and a number of things I thought were fair call, but unfair in a sense, because he had such a stellar career as a chancellor of different universities and so forth. But he looked into this before he resigned, and he said, look, there was foreign interference. The CSIS people in CSC were aware of it, but it didn't rise to the level of affecting the election. Then they named another judge to look into this matter. Her conclusions have basically been the same, that CSIS and the security services were aware of this. And David McGuinty, the chair of the House of Commons National Security Committee that oversees CERC and CSIS and CSC, McGuinty came out and said, we're aware that these things are going on, and we're aware in some cases that there were MPs who had discussions with these people. Okay, so they're aware of it. Does that make whoever those MPs are, from whatever party they are, treasonous? I don't think so, because what it tells me is they're aware of it. They're aware this is going on. And then to be fair to the government and to Dominic LeBlanc at this point, and so to McGuinty, if it's at the level where there's some kind of a criminal thing happening here, then the RCMP investigate and charge those people. None of that has happened. So what we're seeing here is, and then of course you have the problem with these intelligence briefs can only be seen by certain people. MPs that are on this committee have to swear an oath. They're not allowed to disclose stuff, or they can be charged. This is why Poilievre smartly wouldn't agree to sign on to read these briefs that Jagmeet Singh and Elizabeth May, as leaders of their parties, read, and that the PM knows. Poilievre wouldn't read it. He sent another one of his caucus members to represent him in this, because he wants to be able to, as the leader of the opposition, continue to ask questions about this and criticize the government for their mismanagement of parts of this. That is the right call. Actually, it's interesting to me, Thomas Mulcair, the former NDP leader, has said the same thing. Poilievre did the right thing here. We need someone like the official leader of the opposition to be able to ask questions about this. But my concern about it is that I think there's this idea of there's a boogeyman here, and that our elections are at risk because of this foreign interference. I don't think that's true. I think it's a concern. I think our parliamentary committee with McGuinty is on top of it. I think that the CSIS people, who I've criticized for other things in the past, in some of the articles in Ottawa Life, for example, on the trucker thing and other things, but I think CSIS is on top of this. I think CSC is on top of it. I think CERC is on top of it. The problem is, though, that it's a better story politically to say, the Chinese, the Indians are interfering in our elections, and it's causing our government to have people in it that are controlled by a foreign power. There's a part of that I think that's very dangerous, and I've been critical of Bob Fife and the Globe and Mail, oh, their sources at CSIS and these stories they're doing and they're winning awards for their sources. Does anybody really peel back the onion on this and read what they're saying, what these sources are saying? This is not, in my view, significant information. This is low-level stuff. And then all of a sudden, when it comes out after they write these stories that this could have thrown the election, then all of a sudden their source is speaking again and saying to them, oh, that's not what I meant. I didn't really mean they could throw the election. I'm going, is this serious? Like, you're not serious. And frankly, what's come out now from the parliament by McGuinty and the other members from other parties on this committee is, there are some MPs talking to other people. They questioning the appropriateness of that. But I think we have to be really careful when we start to suggest that these are acts of treason and so forth. We don't know the detail of that. If there's there haven't been a criminal investigation.
Okay. Let's go to another issue then. So I've got a show on this week in regards to our defense spending and that we're not meeting our NATO commitments. And an individual who's well versed in this topic, David Perry, who says that if there was ever a time in history, other than maybe the Cuban Missile Crisis or World War II, that we should be spending our defense commitments to NATO, now is the time, given what's going on in Eastern Europe, in the Middle East, and the threats of what could go on in Asia Pacific. What do you think of our current defense spending?
Well, first of all, Brian, that's actually, I didn't know you're having that show. That's a great show to have. The CGI is probably the most respected institution in the country when it comes to defense and security matters. Not probably, they are. And there's no question about it, at least in Ottawa, the recognized go-to person in Canada, the expert on procurement and on defense matters, is David Perry. But he's second to no one. This guy is, Mr. Substance. He knows this file deeply. He's been on it for 20 years. The fact is that Canada's unwillingness and irresponsibility not to meet our 2% defense spending is now hollowing out not only our defense and security credibility in the world, which is just at zero right now with our allies. It's also starting to have a hollowing out effect in terms of our economic relations, because other countries, including many countries in Europe and the United States, are saying, you're not meeting your defense commitment to our alliances, and that impacts economies and other things, because when you're not meeting your commitment, we have to use money from our economies to fill the gaps that you're not paying for. So we have to pay more for the defense of your Arctic, and we have to pay more for the defense of what you're supposed to be doing in NATO. And we were not allowed to join ANCUS, the security tripartite between France and Australia and the United States. We were not invited to join because we're not taken seriously. Canada, Justin Trudeau, he makes a fool of our country at the G7. He gets up and he goes Slava Ukraine in a formal photo, and everyone looked at him like he was some kind of dweeb. This guy, there are real people dying over there. It's such a trite thing to do. It's so disrespectful. They have lost over 300,000 people in the war in Ukraine, another 300 more on the Russian side, in this awful violence. Trudeau says he's going to support Ukraine through our alliances with NATO. He sent 4 tanks. We couldn't even get the tanks, and we haven't done them. He made commitments a year ago he hasn't met. We have not. Our shipbuilding program is a mess. It was supposed to start at $30 billion. It's over at $85 billion now. So our credibility with the 2% defense spending has now seeped over past defense and security issues into economic issues. It's affecting our relationship, our trade relationship with the United States, our trade relationship with Europe. Because one of the things they're saying is, hang on a second, you want to do more trade with us? You want to have more preferences given to you under the FTA and these other things, and you're asking for all these privileges, or you want to be treated differently as a country, but you don't meet your defense spending. You don't do anything for the security that you're supposed to do. So it's a disaster under Trudeau. Defense is a disaster under this prime minister.
And yet you're complaining that we've got this huge amount of overspending. You're suggesting we need to spend more. And so there's got to be a lot of savings somewhere else.
Well, what I'm not the overspending. It's this is there's two different things there. The point is, what have they done with all this money?
Where's it
Where
gone?
has the Where's it gone? We don't have better transit systems. We don't have better cities. We don't have better quality of living. We don't have lower rent. We don't have people able to buy homes. We don't have cheaper
Arrive
groceries. We
can,
don't
consultants, McKinsey.
corruption. Corruption. This is a corrupt government. A prime minister who's been, as I said earlier, 3 times corrupt. We have several cabinet ministers who've been sanctioned by the ethics commissioner. This is a corrupt, destructive, corrosive government that is hollowing out our country. And to the people in St. Paul's, depending on what happens tonight, like there's an old saying, right? You can't fix stupid. I mean, Einstein, you quoted Einstein earlier. Einstein said there are two things for sure that we know. One is there is a universe, and the second is there is stupidity. And we're getting a lot of that in Canada right now. David Perry show, I'll be watching for that, because this is a real problem that even the Business Council on National Issues has come out. And that's a business council. They're not into defense and stuff. Even they have come out now and said, we need to do something about our lack of credibility on defense and security because it's affecting our economy now.
We're running out of time. I got one other issue I want to raise with you. We're going to take a final break for some messages and be back with Dan Donovan in just 2 minutes. And I'm going to ask him about anti-Semitism, which is an issue that he's also very passionate about. Stay with us, everyone. Back in 2. Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. My guest is Dan Donovan. We've done a whole overview of the by-election that's happening tonight in Toronto, what we think is going to happen, what its implications are going to be on the political landscape. And we've also talked about numerous different issues across Canada. But Dan, I wanted to talk to you about one last issue that you raised before we started tonight. And that was, you said, growing anti-Semitism. Tell me what you feel about that issue, sir.
Well, to the listeners, I would say this. What is happening in our country right now is a national disgrace. These protests at campuses are insanely misguided. They are based on ignorance. They're not based on historical fact. They are put together by people who are threatening Jewish people in this country. When did it become acceptable in our country for people to cover their faces? These people are cowards. Anybody that wears a mask at a demonstration is a coward. And to all those oxygen-deprived students out there that are walking around with COVID masks on thinking you're tricking everyone, you're not. Somebody that's telling you, oh, they'll just think it's a COVID mask. You're covering your faces, and people that cover their face and yell things. And pardon my language, Brian, but I've been at watch these people say things like, fuck the Jews, kill the Jews, exterminate the Jews. Hey, by the way, from the river to the sea means to exterminate Jewish people. That's what it means. And for the students out there that don't do some reading, that's exactly what it means. When did it become acceptable in this country for people to go out and threaten Jewish people, to threaten their synagogues, to threaten their businesses? Where were the police when those losers were walking through a Jewish neighborhood in Toronto and yelling anti-Semitic chants at families and kids? This is a disease. Anti-Semitism is becoming a cancer in Canada. And non-Jewish people in this country need to start standing up and pushing back against this hate. It is hate. We have a spineless prime minister who has allowed this stuff to proliferate. We have a very rabid, cancerous anti-Semitism on the left parties in this country. The Green Party leader, Elizabeth Mays, there's a clip, go on YouTube and see it. She takes her orders from the PLO. That's what she said. Jagmeet Singh and the NDP get up. We wrote an article on it called Crystal Knocked in Parliament. It was the most disgraceful display of anti-Semitism in Parliament in our history, where they were trying to couch and make excuses for the disgusting Hamas Palestinian massacres of October 7th. People in Toronto need to wake up. People in Canada need to wake up. Non-Jewish Canadians need to come out and to start supporting people in our country who are attacking Jewish citizens and their religious institutions. And I'm ashamed by it. I'm just so disgusted and ashamed by it. It pains me greatly, Brian.
Dan Donovan, thanks for joining us. I really appreciate it. That's our show for tonight, everybody. Thank you for joining us. It'll be interesting to tune in about 2 hours and see what the results are in the by-election and see what this portends for the future of the Liberal Party, the future of the Canadian Parliament, the future of our next federal election, and the future of Canada. Because I think, as Dan has spoken about, we have a lot of challenges in Canada today that we're not addressing. And my own concern, Dan, and I've got another show with Dave Meslin on this week in regards to democracy or the lack thereof, is I worry that not enough people are listening. Not enough people are paying attention. Not enough people are turning out in election campaigns. And while a lot of what you say, if not everything you say, is very accurate, I worry not enough people care, and aren't going to come out and vote. And so I really worry about the state of our democracy. Anyway, that's for another day. Thanks, everybody.
I hope you're wrong. I hope you're wrong, Brian.
So do I. But the last by-election I was involved in with a 25% turnout, which had some pretty dramatic problems, portends a bad result. Anyway, that's for another discussion. That's our show for tonight, everybody. Thank you for joining us. I remind you, I'm on every night, 6 o'clock on 960 AM. You can stream me online, even from Ottawa, at www.saga960am.ca. Good night, everybody.